Welcome to Leading Minds Revealed, the podcast that pulls back the curtain on how today's top leaders harness the power of mindfulness to conquer the fast-paced, ever-changing world of business. In each episode, we sit down with C-suite executives and leaders who share their strategies for navigating rapid change with skill and clarity. Join us as we uncover the transformative mindsets that drive extraordinary leadership. These insights aren't found in business books, and they'll revolutionize the way you lead. And now, here's your host, Michael Apollo.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Leading Minds Revealed. In today's episode, we're going to explore the foundational principles of building a successful business. My guest has spent over 30 years navigating transformation, sales psychology, and leadership. He built one of Canada's first online life insurance platforms, scaled it from a one-person operation to an agency of 127 brokers, and eventually sold it to Hub International in 2020. In this episode, you're going to learn the key mindset shifts required when moving from being a solo operator to leading teams and scaling a business, how to optimize the sales process and consumer experience while driving sustainable growth, strategies for motivating teams and aligning them around common goals, and on a more personal level, how health, resilience, and family life intersect with leadership and long-term success. With that, I'm excited to welcome my guest today, entrepreneur, business builder, and strategic leader, Lorne Marr. Welcome to the show, Lorne.
Thanks for having me, Michael.
My pleasure. I'm really looking forward to this discussion, primarily because I'm fascinated with how to build businesses and also the psychology of sales. And in particular, it's really interesting, when I got into this industry of working with sort of this applied neuropsychology, mindfulness, a lot of people, a lot of my close friends who came out of business school were wondering, how the heck are you going to, be able to do something like that? And what was essential was my knowledge of how to build businesses, that came out of that time at school, and then just the chops of going through experience. And you have a lot of that. You've had such a fascinating career, from starting as an agent in 1993 to pioneering, an online insurance marketing, eventually building and selling your own agency. So to start off, what do you see as foundational principles that leaders need to build a successful business today?
I think there's a variety of skills, but I think one is to have have a really good vision. That's you have to have a vision for your business, and then to have an eye on how you're going to get from point A to point B, and be able to deal with all the hurdles that can happen along the way. Because there's always going to be little things, big things, and little things that are going to happen to you as a business owner, and you got to be able to react to those things in real time.
Mhm. And so what does that look like? Like, what did that look like for you in that establishing that vision? What helped you? What are some of the, the building blocks of moving through that process?
Building blocks for me were just once again setting up having a plan, and then setting up the pieces and components of that plan to kind of get that in place, and getting surrounded by a good team. So and sometimes that team may be very small to start with. It may be might just be yourself to start with, but obviously, but once you get going a little bit, to get yourself to have good people, because that's ultimately how you grow something. Is there's only so many hours in a day and in a week. So, if you have 200 hours that you got to devote towards different activities, you can't do all of that in a week yourself. So it's getting those people, and kind of, I think there's a lot of similarities between building a sales career and essentially building a business, because when you're in sales, you're trying to focus your activities on the most profitable activities. That's how you can kind of grow your sales numbers, is what what activities in a given week are generating the most profit for me. And the same thing with the business owner, looking at all the things that I have to do as a business owner, trying to find where your highest value activities are, and then being able to delegate all the other activities. And that's a really a crucial thing, and getting good people obviously to delegate those activities to. But if there are certain activities that are making you, $400 or $500 an hour, and other activities that are, $30 or $40 an hour, the more time you can focus on those $400 to $500 hour activities, and the less time on the 30 to 40 hour activities, the more profit and the more successful your business is going to be.
And is that something that was sort of at the forefront of your focus during that business building, time frame? Um, and then what would that also look like? What were some of the activities that sort of helped you to reprioritize continuously?
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of, in the insurance industries, there's a lot of support of men, so you can really get bogged down in some of the, like, at that time, like banking changes, address changes, you know, uh, everything from, working out getting the checks out to the different brokers at that time, or people suppliers that you owed funds to in a given day. Certain things that needed to be taken care of in the office, like getting the water cooler fill, ordering the water for the water cooler, and all kinds of little things that happen. And if you try and do all of those things yourself, the really the really high value activities, like me, talking to certain lead suppliers, building relationships with key brokers, those were high value activities for me. And that's where I wanted to kind of focus my energy, and where I had a unique skill set for those activities that would be difficult to delegate those activities. Whereas certain things like, ordering water for water cooler, that's not really, it's not a high skill set activity. It's an important activity. People need to drink, but it's not necessarily, a high skill or high learning curve activity. So that's one key thing in the business is, when you start to hire people, you know, get them accustomed to those low learning curve activities first, because you don't want to throw them into the fire with too many advanced activities, because then you're going to end up spending a lot of time. I mean, there is time. It's funny when you hire someone. It's almost like initially, that's why so many people are hesitant to do it, because you have, let's say you're working 50 hours a week. You got 50 hours a week. You're devoting it to all those different things you have to do, and you're thinking, well, if I got to train this person, that's going to eat into my 50 hours a week. I'm going to have less time for my other stuff. But it's a bit of a short-term pain for long-term gain, because you might be training them on 10 to 15 hours of stuff that you're going to have to show them. You're going to actually lose that time, because it might take them longer at first. But eventually what happens is you get those 10 to 15 hours back because they're doing it. And eventually, because they're doing it over and over again, they actually become better at it than you. So a lot of the admin items that I might have been doing, I'm only spending, a percentage of my time doing those activities. So I'm not getting quite as good at someone who's spending 100% of their activities at those items. So that's a really key thing is how you're going to train those people, how you're going to treat those people. All those types of things can be really crucial in building your business, and not being afraid to let go. You can't be a micromanager on smaller activities. I guess some people can't, but I was never a micromanager. I gave people activities. Once I felt comfortable that they were capable of doing those activities, then I let loose with it, and let them own those activities.
Yeah, so just to sort of reframe it from my perspective, on a pragmatic day-to-day basis, it seems like it's really, really important to think about what is it that can create the greatest impact in your business, and on a day-to-day basis, what are the things that you do and that you can do really well that are that fit into that category, and then just sort of look at what are the day-to-day tasks that I'm doing regularly that are outside of that sort of scope, that core focus. And so to just check in regularly and go, okay, where is my focus? What are the highest priority items that have the greatest impact on the business that I can just focus on and do more of that. Now, from as the business grows, is to look at how to delegate more of these other tasks that aren't that aren't within that scope, but need to be done, right? And that's a great opportunity there as well to start training up other staff, employees, team members, etc., to sort of cut their chops on that on those activities and to steadily grow up their capacity and become familiar. At first, there's that initial investment, but then it's gonna pay off down the road.
Yeah, and then it gives you, I mean, I think ideally what you're doing with a business is you're getting the right person to the right activity. That's really key in a business, is the right person does the right thing. And they keep refining how they do that thing. So, I've always been pretty good at building relationships. So I keep refining how my ability to build those relationships, to build trust, to build high leverage relationships, and you keep getting better at those activities because you're devoting all of those activities. It's kind of like when I started out in sales and individual production sales. It's like if I had a week, like one of the things I was most proud of in my sales career, which is the early part of my career, is that I never had what I call the blank week. I never had a week where I didn't make a sale. And part of the reason for that, I think there were two reasons for that. One is I always made sure I had a lot of appointments. So at that time when I started, I had 15 appointments in a week. That was always my goal, to have 15 sales appointments in a week, which is a pretty high number in our industry. And it did two things. It took a lot of pressure off me in individual appointments, because if you have two appointments in a week, well, one person might not show up, they might be late, and then you're kind of left with one appointment. And if you sell them, okay, but if you don't, you're kind of you kind of have a blank week, which isn't great in sales, depending on the industry. So by having those appointments, it gave me the flexibility to not feel so pressured that if I didn't make a sale in that appointment, it's going to be the end of the world because there were other appointments. But the other thing, and this is where I was kind of going with it, is that a lot of times it took me up to two or three appointments till I felt like I was really in a groove with my presentation. So by the time I got to my eighth or ninth appointment in the week, I was humming. Like I was, everything was smooth. I felt like, the appointments were going very smooth. The presentation was crisp. Everything was really good. But if you're one of those people that had two or three appointments, you never actually got to that level of where you're in a groove. So, and I think that applies to really most things within a business. If you're only doing one activity 10% of the time, or very few times, it's hard to get into a groove with that activity. And if you're trying to wear too many hats, you're not only are you focusing on activities that aren't high value activities, you're not as good at those activities because you don't know where all the things are like that. Whereas if you're, focusing your most of your time on a certain small basket of activities, then you can really get really good at those activities and really streamline those activities.
You've said that, in a previous conversation we've had, that how you've always been fascinated by the psychology of sales and how people move from wanting something to actually, making a purchase. And What have you learned about that process? And how can leaders apply that to their own organizations?
I'd say that that process, early in my career when I was primarily just sales, and I was, I was a top advisor early in my career. One of the things that I was, would tell people, new advisors in the industry, they'd say, well, how come you're selling more? Because essentially in the insurance industry, everyone's selling the same product. It's just, some brokers we sell, multiple carriers, whereas others might sell one or two. But with a given carrier, we all have access to the same product. So, and it's the same price. So why is one salesperson, doing, really well, one's not doing well? And that's what some advisors that are starting out would ask me. And I'd say it's not really one thing. It's actually like 25 things. So it's everything from your morning routine to at that time, to the pen you use. Some of it, a pen's like a silly example, but it's a good example. Some advisors would, come with like a big pen that maybe had like a little bit beat up. Whereas if you had a nice pen, you don't have to have a $500 pen, but if you got a nice pen, you look professional. Now, people are wearing suits a little less. I don't wear a suit, but it's still looking presentable, looking like you've got I don't want to say the word together. People want to deal with that kind of person. So it's a lot of, little things, being making sure you got your sleep the night before, making sure that you're, taking care of your body, making sure that you're able to, keep your posture pretty good, making sure that your energy is good from doing some activity during the day, making sure that you're trying to keep your home life good, so you're not bringing that into your work life. So there's a lot of different components, and I say 25, that's an arbitrary number, but that's probably somewhat accurate. And I think the same thing, that we go back there, sales and being a business owner is very similar, because in sales you kind of, controlling everything. The really great salespeople do consider themselves business owners, because they're controlling all the different functions that help make their production as high as possible. And that's essentially, what you're trying to do as a business owner. You're trying to, optimize sales while producing a positive consumer experience. And that's the same thing with sales. You're trying to optimize sales and giving people a good sales experience.
I think those building blocks, that that's the way I view it, as really this: what's my base camp, that I'm returning to on a day-to-day basis to sustain my own ability to stay sharp, focused, and ability to get through the tasks, to get through all the competing tasks, to be able to, the more rested I am, the less stress I feel, even though I will be stressed. There's a lot of forces coming on me as a CEO that allows me to see with a bit of a broader perspective and be less reactive in the moment too. And I think, you know, approaching it in that way, where it's like, how can we take care of these? They can seem quite simple, but they're these essentials to show up, to not only look the part, but to feel the part, and to be able to lean into the conversations that need to be had, and to excel. And I've heard more and more, and I'm a big fan of this, hearing roadmaps to success, and to be able to be inspired by them, and to inform how we show up based on those roadmaps. And I think, here we're hearing what that looks like from your perspective. Now, I'd love to, just because of the experience that you've had, man, I know you told me you digested probably around like 500 sales podcasts, right? Looking into sales psychology and all of that. let's take it into that. Like when you're in the midst of an encounter with a potential, like with a prospect that could become a client. Walk me through what goes through your mind in that moment. How do you sort of set yourself up to enter into that conversation? How does the conversation unfold? And then how do you follow up on that?
Yeah, it's interesting. You talk about the podcasts and the books. Were books early in my career, and audiobooks or reading books. But I did a lot of audiobooks because I was driving to appointments all the time. That's pre, you know, way, way, way pre-COVID. But you know, pretty much all appointments early in my career and up till, even let's say 2012 would have been, that's when we started doing some stuff, remote stuff, but would have been face to face. So you're spending a lot of time in your car. And what I would do is, I talked a little bit about physical health, and I know you're a healthy guy. I can tell just looking at you. You take care of yourself, and I've always tried to do that as well. And I think the physical health is important, but also the mental health. And the mental health is the stuff that you're putting into your mind. So I try to really, rather than listening to the news, which is I used to do. That's a totally different topic, but I try to go on a news-free diet every once in a while, other than some sports and things. But I try to go on a news-free diet every once in a while, but really stay away from that because those are uncontrollables. I mean, there's bad stuff happening in the world all over the world, and it's not great, but most of it is uncontrollable, meaning that we can't control those things happening. Whereas the things we're putting into our mind are controllables. And I try to, I really felt listening to those different books, podcasts now, get your mind in the right state to go into an appointment. So that's a bit of a tangent, but your question again was on, what would be, how I'd prepare for an appointment. So that's kind of the first thing that I would do is get myself mentally right, and that's getting my morning routine right, doing all the little daily habits that can help you get keep your energy up, and then listening to things that are going to not only enhance your skill set for that upcoming appointment, the way you present, the way you try to close an appointment, all those types of things, but also just get you in the right mindset for that appointment because you're thinking about something that's going to make you better at what you do, which gives you confidence going into the appointment. So yeah, so that's how I would prepare. And then once I'm getting into the appointment, it's really a matter of listening to the people, finding out what their hot buttons are, what their interests are, what their goals are. Because the more you listen, the more you find out about what they're interested in, the better solutions you can offer. And the better you listen, the you're going to increase the trust level as well. Because that's a huge thing in building relationships and any type of sales is creating trust. If you can't create trust, it's going to be very difficult to make sales.
And so now, as the that meeting goes along and you've listened and you've fostered that trust, moving into the closing period of it all. Like I actually a while back, almost 20 years now, I completed the Xerox sales training, right? And it was intense. We would do these I forget what they're would be people would be surrounded in a room where you'd have a phone call and people would be called up, salespeople would be called up to go into the center of the room, pick up the call and close meetings, just get meetings booked. And then we'd be training different ways in terms of like closing sales, etc. And for a long time, I put so much pressure on myself that I was really caught up in my head, caught up in my head that I need to have the answers and I need to go through these steps. And But then the more I went through it and actually started going to the meetings, I started shifting and softening to more like I'm gonna listen and just be really present with this person in front of me and build a relationship and then just seek those solutions that could really solve their problems. And that was a real pivotal shift for me. When you look to aspire to close the sale itself, what does that look like from like a really nuts and bolts perspective? And then, following up on a meeting that may not be an initial close, but you want to tend to that relationship and how do you tend to it, in sort of post initial sales call?
Yeah, those are good questions. I think with the sales appointment, I mean, it's once again having the presentation down is really going to help. Knowing your product, really well is going to help. Being very knowledgeable, that's going to help because it depends on the industry, but in our industry, there's only so long you have, capture a sale in a given appointment. People, their attention span, their the amount of time they'll devote to that appointment is only so long. So what I would try and do is I would look at the appointment almost like, okay, we're starting here and the end point is the close. You know, we're gonna get from here to here. And it's almost like, I think you said you had a little bit of a martial arts background too, right? So not that I had a martial arts background, but I'll give this kind of analogy. It's almost like a little bit of a boxing match, or where things are going to happen in that appointment where it's easy to get off track, where, they're bringing up an objection and you have to deal with that objection. If you can't deal with that objection, the appointment's going to go very off to the side. So you've got to find different ways to meet their needs, get them to agree that you're meeting their needs, and you're getting from here to there, to there, to there, to there, to there, till you get to the close. And you've got to make sure that the appointment doesn't go too sideways. Like if you go over, for example, and it depends, I guess, how many appointments in the industry, how many appointments you need to close a sale, because that can impact things. If it's not all going to happen in one appointment, then you're not going to get from here to here. And sometimes even in our industry, a lot of times it doesn't happen that way either. So, but if you are trying to get from, even if it's a 2 or 3 stage appointment, you want to stay on a path where you can get from point A to point B without too many diversions. Because once the diversions go too sideways, you can't get back on track. It's like a car trying to get to a destination. If you go on too many side streets, it's you're going to fall off you're not going to be able to get to your destination. You got on too many streets and you don't know where you're going anymore. So that's something that I tried to do, is I tried to keep the presentation pretty linear, find the need, get their input on the solutions, get them to agree. I use a lot of trial closes within the presentation. Does this make sense to you? Do you like this idea? Get them saying yes, because the more times someone says yes to what you're offering, the more likely that they're going to purchase it at the end. If someone's saying yes, 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 to to the benefits you're mentioning, it would seem illogical at the end to say no. But if someone's saying, this, I don't like this, I don't like that feature, I don't like that feature. If you're getting a lot of no's and you're not able to turn those no's into yeses, then how are you going to get a yes at the end? Because you have to overcome those objections, basically. And you got to be, part of that's being crisp, knowing your product inside out, being crisp with your presentation, knowing the benefits to their problems, the solutions you have to their problems, and that will help you overcome those objections. Because the objections are essentially, the things that take you off track. And you want them to give you objections. You don't want them to say, I mean, if you're just doing the talking and you get no objections, you're still not going to make a sale because there's no yeses. They're just listening to what you're saying, but they're not in the process. But if they're bringing up objections, you bring up the count, you tell them why this product can help deal with those objections, and then they agree to that. Do you like the way that would fit that concern, or do you feel like I addressed your concern? Yes. And you want to get those agreements, those nods, because if you get that 3 or 4 times within a presentation, then you can go to a close at the end. And there's a variety of different closes, depending on the industry you could use. But, there's no sense closing if they're not agreeing to what you're offering, because there's going to be no sale there, and 90% of the time, or 95% of the time, or whatever the case may be, because they haven't bought into what you're selling.
I think it's such spot on advice that you're sharing there. And to sort of mesh that with my experience as well. There's this, having a really clear, I think, coming back to what you started off with, this like, really clear vision of where you want to go and where you want to, and that comes down to not only for your organization, but for the meetings that you have, and even these, the relationship building that you're doing for sales opportunities, for business building opportunities within your organization. Like, what is that destination point? And how you get there may not be a straight, I mean, it's highly likely it's not going to be a straight line.
You bring what happened if you don't make the sale. And what happens is that you basically you follow up and do all the little things, because in any different industry there's going to be a lot of different people. Sometimes there's 9 or 10 different people trying to get their business. Sometimes there's 2 or 3. But in our industry, like, for example, someone visits one of our websites, requests information for life insurance, they might go to 3 or 4 other websites, and it's the person that does the best follow-up that's really going to in the best delivery, that's going to be able to make that sale. So you may not, they may not agree to buy something right away, but it's that, thanking them for their time, sending them a text, sending them an email, listening to cues within the meeting, something that has some, maybe their child has a birthday, maybe they're going to Jamaica or wherever. There's something in their lives that are happening. Asking them how those things happen in a sincere way, in a sincere way. And what's that going to do? That's going to build trust. And that's I go back to that again. If you have 3 separate, let's say you're trying to do your basement. If you reach out to 3 people for quotes, it's the people that are not necessarily the least expensive one that's going to get the business. It's the one that you trust is going to do the job. And you get that trust by them listening, by them picking up on cues that happen during your conversation with them. The person who follows up with that quote, everyone may give them a quote. If you reach out to 3 people for a quote on a basement, and that's not my industry, but all 3 may give them a quote, but it's the person that's following up with them after that initial quote. They may have said they want to do their basement, and then all of a sudden their kid gets sick, or they had to travel somewhere for work. So, the person that's following up on that, saying, asking about that, and then continuing to follow up, and this may not happen for 6 or 9 months down the road, is the one who's going to get the business. And it's having those systems in place to keep following up, because you may have, I may have had 400 or 500 people at any one time that was in that process, where they're not buying right now, but they may be buying, 3 months from now or 4 months from now. So in a given day, I'd have 15 people that I'm reaching out to that would fall within that cycle. And then some of them would say not interested. Well, then they're no longer on the list. If I find they're truly not interested, some of them would agree to a meeting, and some of them would get pushed forward. And, keeping that cycle going. So the ones, You got your set of meetings this week. You're going to make X amount of sales. You got the certain number of people that get pushed forward into the future, and then you're finding new people to fill up that pool again. So it's keeping that funnel full and optimizing the way you deal with that funnel. And then there's no pressure, because you have all these. If you have 300 or 400 people that you're dealing with, that you think are future sales, and your numbers, X number of those are going to be sales. There's no need to pressure them into or to feel pressured to make a sale, because there's going to be X number of sales in a given week. It's just, that's just the way the numbers flow.
The following up, right? It's like what you were sharing there. You may, I mean, customers, all of many people right now are highly educated, and they seek multiple quotes, they seek more information. And I think it's so important to have that follow-up approach is so integral, and getting out of our way of thinking that we shouldn't do that for some reason. And I think thinking about it from a compassionate perspective, going, maybe there's something happening in this person's lives, right now, and that they're not able to come to right now, and that's fine too. And I think it's just really humanizing the approach, where it's not trying to hard sell somebody, but just compassionately meeting them where they're at and offering them a solution that they feel that is aligns with their needs, and being there and being present with that. And I'm interested, like, just one other question around from the sales perspective. When you have 300, 400, 500 people that you're interacting with, that those are big numbers. What are how do you manage that on a daily basis? What's your approach for that, and sort of how would you structure your day?
Yeah, it's systems. Like, you have your call up systems, whatever, CRM you're using, or whatever system I was using back in the day to keep track of those people. And then, once again, you're having your team help with some of those things. So if there's, if there's quotes, having someone help with those quotes. Because if you're trying to do all the quotes yourself, or trying to put together the material for them, there's not enough time. So having team member to help you get the supporting documents that those people need. And then then we talked about all at one time I probably had 5,000 clients. So how are you dealing with those 5,000 clients? You have to have systems in place to make sure that those clients are getting really good service. And my clients, funny part is, my 5,000 clients were probably getting better service. I would say they were getting better service than the broker agent who had 200 clients or 100 clients, because I had the systems in place to make sure that everyone who called in on something, the response happened. So whether the response is from me or the response is someone from my team, and it was still a small enough business where I, was able to make sure that all the people that I was delegating tasks to were on board with how I thought service should be generated. Once you get to a team of, you know, 4,000 people, 5,000 people, huge companies like that, that's why things often fall off the rails, because it gets so big and there's so many layers. And if you look at government, a whole separate topic, why it becomes, why it doesn't work is government's generally a giant, giant, giant company, and it's not a for-profit company. That's probably another problem. But when something gets so big, it loses that personal feel. But you, as a relatively, small to mid-sized business owner, you can keep it tight enough where you can make sure everybody's on board and what's happening, but still have the time to service all those people. So I think most business owners don't need to get to that stage where there's layers and layers of organizational chart. You can run a company that's highly profitable without with still having that personal feel.
So, maybe touching on that, I mean, you grew your agency from a solo practice into 127 brokers before joining Hub. What were the biggest mindset shifts that you had to make to transition from solo operator to building and then leading, and playing a leadership role in the company?
Yeah, it's the mindset was that you do lose a little bit of, you got to be willing to give up a little bit of control, and the people aren't going to necessarily, they're not going to do things the way that you'll always do that, especially with brokers. I had my way of doing things. A lot of them have their way of doing things, and there's no one technique. Like, that's the great thing about our industry and business in general is that there's a lot of different ways to be profitable and succeed. And I had certain things that I think that were universal that would work in pretty much any industry or for any brokers, but there were a lot of things that other brokers were doing that I wouldn't have done, but it was still working for them. It was still, creating good positive results. But looking at really building an agency and building these brokers become your clients essentially. So finding out what their needs are, what their how I can help them grow their business is was a big thing. So and then finding out helping people on the team, what's important to them, what types of things can we do to optimize things. We were one of the first companies to do like a 4-day work week because I had my office manager was lived pretty far from the office. So we put in a 4-day work week where we could condense and had other people on the team fill in on the days that she wasn't available, but helped build value because you could save on that commute time, which was a big thing. Now people are working from home; it's less of a big deal. But in the around 2007, 2008, that was a really big deal.
So, I mean, you've emphasized as well the importance of involving team members in the processes, making them feel heard, celebrating wins together. Can you share a story or example where this approach made a difference? I think it's such an important aspect of leadership. Would love to could you bring that to life for us? What does that look like?
We would do things, we would do like a lot of different things where if we had really strong, if we hit some of our targets for the month or the week, we would do we had like this Buddha juice, it was like this fresh juice thing. So I'd bring them all in for everyone from the office to kind of celebrate that, or we'd do, certain celebration lunches, things like that. We even, might do a spa day for them, all kinds of little things to kind of let them know that they're appreciated and let them know that going the extra mile is really appreciated. And some days, we would have to put in some extra hours because certain tasks had to get met that were really important. But you got to, it's like an elastic band. You can't keep stretching that band too much because then it's going to break. Everything can't be an emergency. If every day is an emergency, then when there's an emergency, it's not an emergency. It's like it's like a little boy crying wolf. So just, knowing how far you can kind of stretch that workload for them and, finding those sweet spots, not turning everything into an emergency.
You mentioned that health and staying active is essential is central are central to your success. I know you mentioned, I think we were talking about martial arts, about 12 years in Taekwondo. How has physical activity and well-being, maybe even I would love to know, Taekwondo. I have my own perspectives. I'm doing Shotokan karate as as my one of my central physical pursuits, and then I do long distance cycling. It provides me a clarity of mind. It allows me to be fully present in those moments, fully immersed in my body and what I'm doing and learning my surroundings. And it gives me it refreshes my mind in some really interesting ways. How has that helped you and supported your leadership? And and business building.
Yeah, I've always been active. I mean, Taekwondo was one of the things that I did for a lot of years, and I started a little later, so I mean, I was okay at it, but they didn't get my black belt. But it's just the physical, just having physical activity and staying active, I think are crucial. I think one, it gives you an energy. I one of the things I'm most one of the things I'm very proud of is I think I've missed half a day at work in 30 years due to sickness, over 30 years. So then part of that's good fortune, for sure. But part of that is, that I've taken care of myself. I've pretty much done some type of activity, given walking, stretching, working out with weights, taekwondo, play a lot of baseball, uh, almost every day of my life for since I was like, maybe 12 years old. So I'm 56 now. So that's, something that's just become fundamental in my life. It's just, and I felt like it gave me more energy, lets you sleep better. It lets you burn off a lot of the stresses from work, because rather than burning off the stress with more stress, you're burning off the stress with something positive that's going to help you that. And then physically, you feel and you look better. Like you look like, someone who's in control of their life. If you're taking care of your health, I mean, there's a good chance that you're going to be able to take care of the other components of your life a little better. Now, that's not always going to happen. There's lots of guys that, lots of ladies and guys that are fit, and the rest of their lives are mess. And vice versa. Lots of very successful business owners that are completely out of shape. But I think for the most part, I think that you have a better chance of being successful in business if you're taking care of your health.
And in life too, I
Yeah,
think for
this is
me.
their life. Yeah, for sure. You're just gonna have a better life. I mean, it's kind of pointless, not pointless, but there's not a lot of joy in having a lot of money if you don't have the health to enjoy that money. So ideal is to have the health mentally and physically, and have the money to enjoy that health. I mean, out of the two, the first one is more important because, if I have to choose between the two, I'd certainly rather have my mental and physical health than money, because, like I said, if you have, and everyone's health is going to deteriorate at some point, but you're kind of doing your best to optimize those two things, and they kind of work together. But I really do think that physical and mental health is the foundation. I mean, it's the one. I said if I ever had a job that didn't allow me to work out, then it's time to find a new job, new career. I never really had a job. I've always had a career, or a business. But if there wasn't time to work out, then it's time to find something new to do that does give me that time to exercise.
Yeah. And I find, I mean, just being able to be so grounded, it also supports my family life in a really big way. And I know you have 3 kids, and you've been so driven. You did share how important it was to include them, just like you include your teams, but include them in some of the decisions that you make in terms of how you share in the success, and to acknowledge some of the times you're gonna have to endure through the challenges. Right. And maybe just as a last piece, maybe you could just share a little bit about that, for those like me.
Big, especially early in my career. I had it's a challenge because I had small kids. And at that time I was working, between 50 and 60 hours a week. So there's sacrifices, but really, I remember saying to the kids that if I make this number of sales in the week, then we'll do a really cool dinner, or we'll do, movies with the big seats or whatever, and or we'll go out to fun place. So kind of, or so I'd have my weekly, my monthly, and my yearly goals, and I would actually have them all set out, laminated, and but I would get them involved in the reward process of the goals. So I'd set up like a level 1, level 2, level 3 goal for a week, level 1, level 2, level 3 for the month, level 1, level 2, level 3 for the year, and then corresponding rewards for each target. And then the rewards, I would tell them, let's do these as like family rewards. So this is what, and some of them might be simple. Like if you're level 1 for, for whatever, it might be just let's go for a yogurt or something, on Friday, whatever day, one of those frozen yogurt places or something. We'll do that. And if I do level 2, then we'll do something else or level 3. And then, a 4-year-old thinks, well, this is really cool. Maybe you'll get, even if it's a small reward. See, I worked late that night, but now we're getting this and we're celebrating this together. And then if you hit the, your yearly goal, then you make it like a really big celebration. And I find it kept everyone on board, like really kept everyone on board. So those nights when you came home late, rather than them saying, oh, you came home late again, there's no, you're not making any time for the family, say, I know I'm working late, but this is what we're going to do. But I really have to follow through on those things. Because if you don't follow through, then it's just like a cycle, or like a hamster on a wheel. You're just going, you're going this way, this way, this way, but you're not getting off the treadmill. So you got to get off that hamster wheel or that treadmill and really enjoy those successes. And it really, success is always a lot more enjoyable when you got somebody to share it with.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I think being so intentional to center around the greater picture too, and and around the family unit and how you all move through this together, and even just sharing with us how you map that out, I think is incredibly valuable and something I'm going to take away actually with my family. Lorne, I'm so grateful for the time that we've had today. If any one of our listeners wanted to continue to connect with you, what would be the best way? Would it through LinkedIn or some other place that they can learn more?
Yeah, they can connect with me through LinkedIn, or my email's lorne.marr@hubfinancial.com. Either way is fine.
Great, great. Well, we'll make sure to put the link to your LinkedIn into the description.
And then our website for anyone, not an additional plug, anyone who's interested in finding out about insurance is ellisoninsurance.ca.
Fantastic. So we'll definitely put that link in there too, in the description. Check that out. Make sure to follow Lorne. And Lorne, again, I think we've covered a really interesting foray into, you know, moving from a solo operator into building a business and really tending to the high priority activities that will provide you with the success that a business needs, as an organization needs, as you need, as either a person in sales or as a leader within an organization. And as well, just how to really think about the sales process really from a real human and practical way, and your wisdom really shone through that. And then how to really bring it home, literally how to bring this work home in a way that can be intentional and that can support you, and how you can set up the foundations to support yourself from a health and wellness perspective. I'm really grateful for that time. Thanks so much for joining us on the show.
My pleasure. Great talking with you.
And thank you to all our listeners for tuning in to Leading Minds Revealed. I'll see you at the next one.
Leading Minds Revealed podcast requires more than a conversation. It takes action, research, and collective wisdom. If today's episode resonated with you, we'd love to hear your insights, join the conversation, and help us shape the future together. We'll be back with more stories, strategies, and real-world solutions that are making a difference for everyone. In the meantime, be sure to subscribe, rate, write a review, and share it with someone you think would benefit from it too. Thanks for listening, and see you on the next episode.